Every 100 years, the powerful species of the galaxy gathered to show their strength. They brought their bonded war beasts, creatures so dangerous that entire planets feared them. This tradition had continued for thousands of years. It decided who ruled which sectors, who paid tribute to whom, and who would be left alone. Ambassador Diane Cole watched through the observation window as alien ships arrived at the massive station. She was a small woman with gray streaks in her dark hair, chosen for this mission because she never panicked. Earth needed someone calm today. Humanity had only been part of galactic society for 20 years. They were still considered primitive, still learning the rules. The Vreth delegation arrived first. Their war beasts were called shadow maws, 12-legged hunters that could phase through solid walls. The creatures moved like nightmares given flesh, their bodies flickering between visible and invisible. Their handlers walked behind them with expressions of cold pride. Next came the Khalid with their stone-crusher leviathans. These beasts were the size of small buildings, with armor-plated skin and jaws that could bite through starship hulls. The station trembled slightly as they moved through the specially reinforced corridors. The Serati brought their psychic mantids, elegant insectoid creatures with crystalline eyes that could shatter minds with a single glance. Even through the window, Diane felt a whisper of pressure against her thoughts. Species after species arrived with monsters bred for war. Each delegation displayed their apex predator with ceremony and threat. The message was clear: we are not to be challenged. Diane looked down at the small transport crate at her feet. Inside, something shuffled and made a soft whining sound. She had argued against this plan. The diplomatic corps had overruled her. They said humanity needed to make a statement, needed to show that Earth produced something unique. She was not sure this was what they meant. The Great Hall of the Conclave was built to intimidate. Pillars of dark metal rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow. The floor was transparent, showing the stars below. Around the circular chamber, delegations stood with their war beasts, each creature more terrifying than the last. High Arbiter Salmond of the Vreth called the assembly to order. He was tall and gray-skinned, with 3 eyes that moved independently. His shadow maw crouched beside him, phasing in and out of visibility with each breath. One by one, species presented their apex beasts. The Khalid demonstrated their Leviathan strength by having it crush a block of compressed steel. The Serati showed their mantid's power by having it paralyze a volunteer from a lesser species. The crowd watched with appreciation and fear. Then Salmon turned his 3 eyes toward the human delegation. Earth, he announced. A Category 9 Deathworld. High gravity, extreme weather, aggressive biosphere. We have heard stories of your planet's dangers. Show us what predator you have bonded. Diane walked to the central platform. She carried the transport crate carefully. Around her, sensors activated as alien scientists prepared to analyze whatever horror emerged from humanity's brutal homeworld. The Vreth leaned forward. The Khalid flexed their massive hands. The Serati's mantids focused their crystalline eyes. Diane opened the crate. A golden retriever puppy tumbled out, barely 4 months old. His fur was the color of sunshine. His tail wagged so hard his entire back and wiggled. He looked up at the assembled nightmares of the galaxy and barked once, a high-pitched sound of pure excitement. His name was Biscuit. Silence filled the great hall. Then came sounds that the translators struggled to interpret. Clicking, whistling, rumbling, all forms of what could only be described as laughter. The most powerful species in the galaxy were laughing at humanity. High Arbiter Salmon's 3 eyes narrowed. This is an insult to the Conclave. You bring a juvenile prey animal to a gathering of apex predators. He is not prey, Diane said calmly. He is a dog. He is food, a Khalid representative growled. The humans mock us. They should be reclassified as a prey species themselves. Biscuit, completely unaware of the danger, trotted over to the nearest shadow maw. The phase-shifting predator was 10 times his size. Its multiple eyes fixed on the puppy with what might have been confusion. Biscuit sniffed its leg and wagged his tail. The shadow maw did not attack. It seemed unsure what to do. Elder Yima of the ancient Orvani had been watching silently. She was old beyond measure, her 6 eyes clouded with age, but still sharp. While others laughed, she studied the puppy with growing intensity. She watched how Biscuit moved without fear. She watched how he looked back at Diane with complete trust. Interesting, she murmured. Security forces began moving toward the human delegation. Diane gathered Biscuit in her arms. The puppy licked her face, happy to be held. She prepared for the humiliation of being escorted out, for the failure of humanity's first major diplomatic mission. Then Biscuit went still. His ears pricked forward. A low growl rumbled from his small chest. He stared at a maintenance corridor on the far side of the hall, his body suddenly tense. 3 seconds later, every alarm in the station began to scream. Something was coming through hyperspace. Something hungry. And the ancient Orvani elder, alone among all the delegates, understood what was about to happen. She had read the old archives. She knew what had defeated the great enemy 12,000 years ago. It had not been apex predators. It had been something else entirely. The ships that dropped out of hyperspace were not built. They were grown. Chitinous hulls twisted like the shells of massive insects. Organic cannons pulsed with sickly light. Thousands of them filled the space around the station, blocking out the stars. Elder Yima spoke one word that silenced every translator in the Great Hall. Swarm. The name passed through the crowd like a disease. Species that had never shown fear now trembled. The hollow swarm had been a nightmare from ancient history, a parasitic civilization that consumed 12 species before being driven to the edges of the galaxy. Everyone believed they were extinct. They were wrong. Boarding pods slammed into the station's hull within minutes. The sounds of metal tearing and creatures screaming filled the corridors. The alien delegates reacted immediately, releasing their war beasts to defend the station. The Shadow Maws phased through walls to intercept the invaders. The Stone Crusher Leviathans charged through corridors, crushing everything in their path. The Psychic Mantids unleashed waves of mental destruction. For a brief moment, it seemed the apex predators would hold. Then everything went wrong. The swarm had evolved during their exile. Their parasites now released a chemical weapon, a pheromone that triggered primal fear in any creature that sensed it. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Shadow Maws, predators that had hunted across 100 worlds, began to whimper. They phased into the station's walls and refused to emerge. The Stone Crusher Leviathans, beasts that could destroy warships, turned on their own handlers in blind panic. The Psychic Mantids overloaded their own minds trying to process the swarm's hive consciousness. Across the station, the mightiest creatures in the galaxy became useless. Worse than useless, they became dangers to the very species they were supposed to protect. Diane ran through smoke-filled corridors with Biscuit clutched against her chest. Around her, aliens fled in every direction. She found herself cornered in a cargo bay with a dozen delegates from various species. Their bonded war beasts cowered behind them, whimpering and shaking. High Arbiter Salmond was among them. His Shadow Maw, the pride of the Vreth Empire, trembled like a frightened child. "They cannot fight," he said, his voice hollow. "The fear breaks them." Biscuit wiggled in Diane's arms. His tail wagged. He sniffed the air with obvious curiosity, completely unbothered by the chemical terror that had reduced apex predators to shivering wrecks. "Put that creature down," Salmon snapped. "We need to find real weapons." Before Diane could respond, the cargo bay door buckled. Swarm scouts poured through the breach. They moved on too many legs, their bodies covered in sharp spines, their mouths filled with parasitic larvae ready to burrow into living hosts. The alien delegates raised their weapons. Their war beasts pressed against the far wall, too afraid to help. Biscuit barked. It was not a threatening sound. It was excited, happy, the bark of a puppy who had found something interesting. He squirmed free of Diane's grip and ran toward the swarm scouts, tail wagging furiously. "No!" Diane shouted. The lead scout paused. It had consumed thousands of creatures across a dozen worlds. It had never encountered something that ran toward it without fear. The hesitation lasted only a second, but that second was enough. Diane dove for a fire suppression panel on the wall. Her fingers found the emergency vacuum purge. She slammed the button. The cargo bay's outer section depressurized instantly. The swarm scouts were sucked into space, their bodies freezing in the void. Emergency barriers slammed down, sealing the breach. Biscuit trotted back to Diane, his tail still wagging. He had found a piece of debris during the chaos and was carrying it proudly in his mouth. He dropped it at her feet and looked up at her, waiting for praise. Diane picked him up with shaking hands. "Good boy," she whispered. "Good boy." The alien delegates stared at her. They stared at the puppy. High Arbiter Salmon's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. "Your beast," he said slowly. It felt no fear. The pheromones did not affect it. "He is a dog," Diane said. "Dogs do not bond through pheromones or psychic links or neural control. They bond through something else." "Through what?" Diane scratched Biscuit behind his ears. He leaned into her hand, his eyes half closed with pleasure. "Love," she said. "They love us. They have loved us for 40,000 years. Fear cannot break that bond because fear is not what created it." Salmon looked at his shadow maw. The creature had been bonded to his family for generations through careful psionic conditioning. It was a perfect predator, loyal and deadly. And right now, it would not even look at him. He looked back at the puppy. The small, ridiculous creature wagged its tail at him. "Explain," Salmon said. "Explain everything." Somewhere in the station, Elder Yima was already searching the ancient Irvani archives. She remembered old records, incomplete histories of how the swarm had been defeated before. The records mentioned bonded ones who could not be broken. She had always assumed that meant warriors. She was beginning to understand she had been wrong. Elder Yima had secured a conference room deep in the station's core. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across the walls. Outside, the sounds of battle continued. Inside, the surviving delegates gathered to hear an explanation that might save their lives. Diane stood at the center of the room with Biscuit in her arms. The puppy had fallen asleep, exhausted by excitement. His paws twitched as he dreamed, probably chasing something wonderful. 40,000 years ago, Diane began, humans were prey. We were slow, weak, and had no natural weapons. Predators hunted us constantly. We should have gone extinct. High Arbiter Salmond shifted impatiently. "We do not need a history lesson. We need weapons." "This is about weapons," Diane said. "Listen." She explained how ancient humans had encountered wolves. The two species should have been enemies. Wolves were predators. Humans were food. But something strange happened. Some wolves began following human camps, eating scraps, warning of dangers. Some humans began tolerating these wolves, even feeding them. Over thousands of years, a partnership formed. Humans did not conquer wolves. They did not enslave them or control them through force. Instead, both species changed together. The wolves became dogs. They grew smaller, gentler, more attuned to human emotions. Their entire biology shifted toward one goal, being with their humans. "Your apex beasts obey because they must," Diane said. "Psionic bonds, chemical dependency, neural shackles. When the pressure becomes too great, those bonds break. Fear is stronger than compulsion." She looked down at Biscuit. "Dogs obey because they want to. They stay with us because they love us. Fear cannot break that bond because love is not a chain. It is a choice made fresh every moment." A Khalid warrior named Gorham laughed bitterly. "You expect us to believe that this tiny creature chose to run toward the swarm? It was too stupid to understand the danger." "No," Diane said. "He understood. He just did not care. I was in danger. That was all that mattered to him." Elder Yima stepped forward. Her 6 eyes were bright with ancient knowledge. "The Orvani archives speak of this. 12,000 years ago, the swarm was defeated. The records were damaged, incomplete. They mentioned bonded ones who could not be broken. We always assumed they meant soldiers." She touched Biscuit's sleeping head with one wrinkled finger. "We were wrong. They meant companions. Creatures whose loyalty came from love, not from control." A crash echoed through the station. The swarm had breached another sector. They were getting closer. Salmon's shadow maw pressed against his legs, still trembling. The mighty predator that had terrified 100 worlds now sought comfort from its master like a frightened child. But the psionic bond was designed for control, not comfort. Salmon did not know how to soothe it. "What do you suggest?" he asked quietly. "We cannot make 40,000 years of history in a single day." "You do not need to," Diane said. "You just need to understand what dogs can do for you right now." The door burst open. Swarm scouts flooded into the room. The alien war beasts cowered. The delegates raised weapons, knowing they were outnumbered. Biscuit woke up. The puppy saw the threat. He did what any dog would do when his person was in danger. He barked, loud and fierce, putting himself between Diane and the swarm. He was 4 months old. He weighed less than 30 pounds. He faced creatures that had consumed civilizations. And he did not run. The swarm scouts hesitated. Their fear pheromones filled the room. Every war beast whimpered and retreated. But the puppy stood firm, barking his challenge at the darkness. That hesitation was enough. Diane had grabbed a weapon from fallen guard. She fired, and other delegates followed. The scouts fell one by one. When the last creature died, Biscuit stopped barking. He turned to Diane, tail wagging, checking to make sure she was safe. She knelt and hugged him. "He did not give us victory," Gorham said slowly. "But he gave us time. He gave us focus. When my Leviathan cowered, I felt lost. But watching this small creature stand against the darkness." He paused. "I remembered why we fight." Salmon looked at his shadow maw. Then he looked at Biscuit. "Your beast inspires courage. It does not feel fear because it loves you. And that love," he struggled with the concept, "it spreads to others who see it." "Yes," Diane said, "dogs cannot defeat the swarm alone, but they can remind us that some things are worth protecting. They can anchor us when fear tries to sweep us away." Elder Yima was already moving toward the communications console. "Contact your homeworld," she told Diane. "Tell them what we need." "What do we need?" Diane asked. The ancient Irvani looked at Biscuit. The puppy wagged his tail at her. "More dogs," Yima said. "As many as Earth can send." Earth responded within hours. Transport ships began arriving through emergency hyperspace lanes. They carried no weapons, no soldiers, no war machines. They carried dogs, hundreds of them, Labradors and Shepherds and Beagles and Mutts, trained service animals and untrained pets, big dogs and small dogs and everything in between. Their handlers came too, veterinarians and trainers and retirees and children, ordinary humans who love their animals and volunteer to help. The alien delegates watched this strange army arrive with confusion and hope. Diane organized the defense around a simple idea. Dogs could not fight the swarm directly. They were too small, too gentle, bred for companionship rather than combat. But they could do something no apex predator could do. They could stay calm. Each canine unit was paired with an alien squad. The dogs provided what Diane called an anchor. When fear threatened to overwhelm the fighters, the dogs remained steady. They wagged their tails. They pressed against their handlers. They reminded everyone that there was still something worth protecting. Gorham the Kala warrior was assigned a beagle named Penny. At first, he considered this an insult. His stone crusher Leviathan had been the most feared beast in 3 sectors. Now it hid in a cargo bay, too terrified to move. And his replacement was a creature that barely reached his knee. "What am I supposed to do with this?" he demanded. Penny wagged her tail and sniffed his armored leg. 2 hours later, a swarm ambush pinned Gorham's squad in a reactor chamber. The parasites poured through every entrance. His fellow warriors fell back, their courage failing as fear pheromones filled the air. Even Gorham felt the terror clawing at his mind. Penny did not run. She sat beside Gorham, her brown eyes fixed on his face. Her tail thumped against the floor. She did not understand the danger. She only understood that her person was here, and she was going to stay with him. Something shifted in Gorham's chest. He stopped thinking about survival. He started thinking about keeping this small creature safe. She trusted him completely. She believed he would protect her. He could not betray that trust. He raised his weapon and charged. The battle lasted 20 minutes. When it ended, Gorham stood among the fallen swarm, covered in their strange blood. Penny sat at his feet, wagging her tail, proud of him. "Good girl," he said. His voice cracked on the words. Similar stories unfolded across the station. The Vreth discovered that dogs could smell swarm infiltrators before they phased into range. The Serati learned that canine presence calmed their psychic mantids, helping the creatures regain focus. Even the stone-crusher leviathans began emerging from hiding. They saw their handlers caring for small animals, and some ancient protective instinct overrode their fear. A human trainer named Carol worked with High Arbiter Salmond. She gave him a German shepherd named Duke. Salmond had commanded fleets and conquered worlds. He had bonded the mightiest predator in Vreth history. But he had never simply sat with an animal and scratched its ears. Duke leaned against Salmond's leg and sighed with contentment. "He does not fear me," Salmond said quietly. "Why would he?" Carol asked. "You have not given him any reason to. My shadow maw fears me. Its obedience comes from that fear. Duke does not obey because he fears you. He obeys because he loves you." Carol smiled. "It takes time to build that bond. But once it forms, nothing can break it." Salmond looked at Duke. The dog looked back at him with complete trust. No psionic conditioning had created this bond. No chemical dependency maintained it. The creature simply chose to be loyal. "How did your species learn this?" Salmond asked. "We did not learn it," Carol said. "We grew into it together. Humans and dogs changed each other over thousands of generations. They taught us to be kinder. We taught them to be braver." The station's defenses were holding now. The fear pheromones still filled the air, but the alien warriors had found new anchors. They fought not because their beasts compelled them, but because small creatures with wagging tails believed in them. The Swarm Hive Admiral watched the battle turn from his command vessel. He was ancient, one of the original survivors who had fled the galaxy 12,000 years ago. He remembered this feeling. He remembered small four-legged creatures that made their bonded species impossible to terrify. He had thought they were extinct. He had been wrong. "Increase the pheromone concentration," he ordered. "Double the boarding forces. Those creatures must be destroyed." His subordinates obeyed. More pods launched toward the station. More parasites swarmed through the corridors. But on every deck, dogs stood with their people. They did not understand war. They did not understand tactics or strategy or the fate of civilizations. They only understood one thing. Their people needed them, and they would not leave. The Hive Admiral committed his entire reserve fleet. If the galaxy learned to resist his fear weapons, the swarm would face extinction. He sent everything at the station, determined to eliminate the dogs and their humans before this new knowledge could spread. Diane watched the approaching wave on the tactical display. Thousands of boarding pods. Millions of parasites. The station could not hold against such numbers. "We need to evacuate," she announced to the surviving delegates. "The knowledge of loyalty-based bonding must survive. If we all die here, the galaxy learns nothing." Transport ships began launching in waves. Each one carried dogs and the aliens who had learned to love them. The Vreth with their new shepherd companions. The Khalid warriors clutching beagles and Labradors. The Serati with calm-eyed retrievers pressed against their sides. Elder Yima approached Diane as the evacuation continued. "Someone must stay to buy time." "I know," Diane said. "You intend to be that person. Biscuit and I started this. We should finish it." The ancient Orvani studied her with 6 ancient eyes. "You humans are strange creatures. You create bonds of love with other species, and then you sacrifice yourselves to protect those bonds." Diane scratched Biscuit behind his ears. The puppy was almost 5 months old now, growing rapidly despite the chaos around him. He still wagged his tail at everything. He still believed the universe was wonderful. "That is what love means," Diane said. "You protect what you love, even when it costs everything." The rear guard formed quickly. High Arbiter Salmond refused to evacuate. His shadow maw had finally stopped trembling, anchored by Duke the Shepherd's steady presence. Gorham stayed with Penny the Beagle. Elder Yima remained, claiming her ancient body would slow the evacuees. Others joined them. Vreth warriors, Khalid soldiers, Sarati telepaths, all fighting alongside dogs that wag their tails and refuse to understand fear. The swarm breached the station's outer defenses. Parasites flooded through the corridors like a tide of chitinous nightmares. The rear guard fought a retreating battle through the station's core, buying time with every step. Dogs barked and snapped at enemies too large to harm, but their barking gave their handlers focus. Their presence reminded warriors why they fought. For every defender that fell, another stepped forward, because somewhere behind them a transport ship carried puppies who trusted that someone was keeping them safe. Diane led her squad through engineering, through life support, through the power core itself. Biscuit stayed at her heels, occasionally barking at threats, always returning to check on her. The Hive Admiral followed. He had to kill the human who had started this. He had to end the threat before it spread beyond control. He pursued with his personal guard the deadliest parasites in his entire fleet. He cornered Diane in the primary power core chamber. The massive reactors hummed around them, containing enough energy to power a small star. Swarm guards surrounded the human and her tiny companion. "You think you have won something," the Hive Admiral said. His voice was a chorus of clicking sounds, translated through a device he wore. "You have delayed us. Nothing more. We will consume this galaxy as we consumed the last." Biscuit growled at him. The puppy stood between Diane and the ancient horror, fur bristling, showing teeth that could barely pierce cardboard. The Hive Admiral laughed. "This is your weapon? This is what broke our conquest 12,000 years ago." "You do not understand," Diane said. "You never did. I understand fear. I understand control. I understand power. You understand chains." Diane reached for the emergency console beside her. "Dogs do not need chains. Neither do we." She activated the power core's emergency purge. Every reactor in the station dumped its energy into the surrounding space. A wave of pure destruction expanded outward, vaporizing the swarm command vessel, crippling their fleet, killing everything within 10 kilometers. Everything except one small sphere of protection. Elder Yima's ancient hand had found the shield controls at the last moment. The energy wave broke around Diane and Biscuit like water around stone. Fire and death surrounded them, but could not touch them. When the explosion faded, Diane lay on the melted deck. Biscuit stood over her, licking her face, his tail wagging uncertainly. "Good boy," she whispered. "Good boy." High Arbiter Salmon found them an hour later. His ship had returned when the swarm fleet scattered. He stared at the destruction around them, at the impossible survival of one human and one dog. "How?" he asked. Elder Yima smiled. "Love protects what it cannot bear to lose. I could not bear to lose them." Biscuit wagged his tail at Salmon. He had found a ball somewhere in the wreckage, singed but intact. He was very proud of himself. Salmon looked at the puppy. He looked at Diane. He looked at the ruins of the swarm fleet drifting through space. "The galaxy will want to hear this story," he said. "Tell them the truth," Diane said. "Tell them we brought a puppy to a fight between monsters." And the puppy won. 1 year passed. The Galactic Apex Conclave gathered again, but everything had changed. The display platforms that once held terrifying war beasts now held something different. Golden retrievers sat beside Vreth warriors. German shepherds walked with collie guards. Border collies worked with Sarati farmers on distant agricultural worlds. The hollow swarm had been driven back to the galactic rim, broken not by superior predators, but by something they could not understand. Love that chose to be brave. Humanity's status had transformed completely. Earth was no longer classified as a minor deathworld species. Humans had become the galaxy's bondmasters, not through conquest or technology, but through sharing. Puppy exchange programs operated on 100 worlds. Alien species learned to breed their own companion animals, guided by human trainers who taught that the goal was not obedience, but friendship. A statue stood in the rebuilt station's central plaza. It depicted Diane Cole and Biscuit, frozen in bronze. The puppy was captured mid-bark, facing down the darkness. Diane stood behind him, one hand reaching to protect him while he protected her. Beneath the statue, An inscription appeared in every known language. They did not fear because they were not alone. Biscuit himself had grown into a handsome adult dog. His golden fur shone in the station's lights as he walked beside Diane through the celebration. He was now certified as a therapy dog, working with trauma survivors across the galaxy. Species that had never known comfort found it in his warm presence. He was also, technically, an admiral in the Vreth Imperial Fleet. I did not ask for that, Diane reminded High Arbiter Salmond as they watched the festivities. The title is honorary, Salmond replied, though he does receive official treats from the Imperial kitchen. Biscuit wagged his tail at the word treats. Gorham the Collet approached with Penny trotting beside him. The beagle had grown plump and happy under his care. She slept on his bed every night and followed him everywhere during the day. His stone crusher Leviathan had eventually emerged from hiding, but Gorham rarely summoned it anymore. I never understood, Gorham said, kneeling to pet Penny. My people bred the most powerful beasts in the galaxy. We thought power meant control. We thought loyalty meant chains. And now, Diane asked, now I know that true loyalty cannot be forced. He scratched Penny behind her floppy ears. She stays with me because she wants to. Every day, she chooses me. That is more precious than any chain. Elder Yima joined them, moving slowly with age, but still sharp-eyed. She had devoted her remaining years to updating the Orvani archives. The truth about the first swarm defeat was now complete. Small creatures with wagging tails had saved the galaxy before, and now they had done it again. Every species is searching for companion animals now, she reported. The Vreth have developed something they call shadow kittens. The Khalid raise comfort grubs. Even my people have adopted a type of moss that purrs when petted. Moss? Diane raised an eyebrow. We are ancient, Yima said with dignity. We bond slowly. The celebration continued below. A Vreth child threw a ball across the plaza. A dozen dogs chased after it, barking with joy. Behind them, things that were almost dogs followed. Creatures from dozens of worlds, bred not for war, but for warmth. Diane watched them play. Her hair was grayer now, her face marked by the year of struggle. But her eyes were peaceful. We spent 40,000 years breeding wolves into friends, she said quietly. We did not know we were preparing for this. Perhaps you did know, Yemus said. Perhaps something in your species understood that the universe needed gentleness as much as strength. Biscuit's great-grandson, a golden retriever named Captain, lay at Diane's feet. He was the first of many puppies Biscuit had sired after the battle. His descendants now lived on 50 worlds, spreading their genetic legacy of loyalty and love. Your species could have brought weapons, Salmon said. You could have brought soldiers. Instead, you brought puppies. Why? Diane knelt and scratched Captain's ears. The dog leaned in her hand, tail thumping against the deck. Because we knew something you did not, she said. We knew that the most powerful force in the universe is not fear. It is not control. It is not even survival. Then what is it? Captain rolled onto his back, demanding belly rubs. Diane laughed and obliged. It is this, she said, the simple choice to stay with someone, to protect them, to love them without asking for anything in return. She looked up at the gathered delegates. Dogs taught us that lesson 40,000 years ago. We just shared it with the galaxy. Below, the celebration grew louder. Dogs barked and played and demanded treats. Aliens who had once feared everything learned to hope. The galaxy, once a hierarchy of predators, was becoming something new, something softer, something that wagged its tail when you came home. Elder Yima placed her ancient hand on Diane's shoulder. We spent 1,000,000 years breeding perfect killers, she said. You spent 40,000 years breeding perfect friends. Which of us was wiser? Diane watched Captain chase a ball across the plaza, his tail a golden blur of happiness. We just got lucky, she said. We found wolves that wanted to be family. And that, in the end, was enough.